rights, women's empowerment, and social justice, holding various leadership positions within the party. Dr. Nafisa Shah, please.
Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Honorable Amin Aslam Sahab, Shahid Hussain Sahab, faculty members of this premier institution, LUMS, experts, students, and ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for extending the invitation to attend this forum, particularly LUMS, Pride, SDPI, Energy First, to this very important Asia Summit for Energy Transition. This summit seems to be a meeting of minds, of experts, academics, policymakers around an urgent issue, that of sustainable energy and the call for transition into renewable, clean energy across the world to face the grave climate change challenge. As an elected representative, no matter what we do, where we are, our constituency resonates and reflects in every aspect of our political presence and voice. So as I stand to speak back in my constituency, people are calling me desperately, one village after another, one neighborhood after another, crying to me to resolve the problem of the ubiquitous missing electricity in my constituency. People are complaining about disconnections, load shedding, transformer thefts, blackouts, huge bills, and this is not just today, but this is a practice since years now. Outside the cities, our country is steeped in darkness. Pakistan today presents a dystopic picture, and this dystopia is not in the least due to its energy crisis. The suffering of the people of Pakistan on account of failure to provide cheap, affordable electricity is, in my view, the most immense crisis of our times. So as we debate energy transition, what we as policymakers are grappled with are to respond to energy shortages, which have crippled the lives of average Pakistani. In Pakistan, at least 2 generations have lived under the shadow of load shedding. Electricity is not only prohibitively expensive, it is unavailable. And ironically, despite a built-in capacity, there is neither the consumer nor the government can afford. Energy crisis has brought economic life to a standstill, leading to business closures, factory shutdowns, loss of productive economy, joblessness, and flight of capital, and now even flight of people. Huge shifts of people are actually taking place, with people seeking refuge in areas where there is better energy security. For experts in Pakistan and academics, Pakistan is a perfect case to study what goes wrong and why on energy policy. Pakistan's electricity rates are alarmingly high, as was pointed out by Ali Chima Sahab earlier in the morning. They stand 45% above the regional standards. Compared to India, maximum average base tariff for residential consumers is 31% higher. Pakistan's energy consumption is also significantly lower than India and Bangladesh, the 2 larger economies of the region. However, this energy consumption or low energy consumption is not by choice, but by force of circumstance. Ladies and gentlemen, equally crippling for the citizens is the state of the economy. At least 2 generations in Pakistan have lived under the shadow of an economy shaped by IMF structural adjustments, characterized by devaluations, high interest rates, and very low growths, raising poverty levels to nearly 40%, according to the World Bank's own estimates. Living beyond our means has led to ballooning of debt, and just our interest payments are 70% of our tax revenue. Energy and economic crises are intertwined and interconnected. Energy crisis is not letting the economy take off, and economic policies, devaluations, weakening of the rupee, and unsustainable debt has worsened our dollar-denominated energy prices, and hence the issue of unused energy capacity or unaffordable energy. Just the numbers before us are mind-blowing. This year, we are set to pay rupees 2.5 trillion in capacity payments to the various power plants, even when we are not going to use the nearly 20,000 megawatts of existing capacity, with many power plants not being operated. Just as we are to pay rupees 9 trillion out of 12 trillion out of our hard-earned revenue, not to build roads, schools, and hospitals, but in interest payments. Our foreign debt dues average $18 billion a year, and we keep pushing these to the next years, further trapping us in the debt cycle. Apart from representing our constituencies, we also have the privilege to sit in a house that represents 250 million Pakistanis, where we can not just speak out, but also hold the government accountable. And in my nearly 15 years in the parliament, I have come to the conclusion that the disruptive political and institutional infighting has incited policy failures that have brought us to the seemingly dead-end street. The twin crises of energy and economy are not natural, nor geographical or geopolitical. They are largely a product of poor decision-making and the way we have done politics. And at some level, Parliament is also at fault for not questioning enough and not seeking transparency of the government's decision-making and not appropriating accountability of the government for itself. It's therefore very high time that the politics of this country is reset on policy and on delivery instead of confrontation and contest. The collapse of energy sector in Pakistan is not just an outcome of poor policies, but also the way we make policy, which is non-transparent, which is arrogant and paternalistic. Policy making, in my view, must be a process rather than a political ragtag of electoral promises hurriedly put into implementation. This process must involve public forums for identification of problems, a public forum, for instance, such as this one. It must involve wider consultations involving experts in civil society before proposals are made, and these proposals must be vetted through parliamentary oversight and debate. Most importantly, cross-party engagement on policy at parliamentary level is important so that on issues of national importance, division is minimal. For instance, the rental take-or-pay power plants were a product of closed-door negotiations, where neither citizens nor parliament had a chance to thoroughly debate the issue. These were impulsive projects where no public hearings or public involvement was there. And strangely, energy was treated as an investment rather than a public utility. So I introduce to you the Energy and Economy Parliamentary Forum. This forum is an idea that came out of a dire need of liberating the debates and discussions from the divisive structures of the parliament and bureaucratic strongholds of the government. A forum outside the routine of parliamentary sittings, standing committee meetings. This is a parliamentary group represented by all parties and is constituted with the objective of leading a cross-party debate on the two most pressing issues of our times, namely energy and economy. Parliament, in my view, must be a step ahead of the government if it is to make impact on the lives of the people. The members of the parliament have to be actively informed and engaged with the issues of concern to the public. This group aims to provide feedback to parliamentarians so that they're able to contribute to the business of the House, armed with all perspectives before them. Our aim is to provide parliamentarians with a platform to speak, to reach out, to understand, to communicate, and to exchange ideas, and to be able to provide our own independent responses to policy. The decision-making in Pakistan is problematic precisely because the parliament often overlooks its own oversight role. While standing committees are officially authorized to play that role, our forum provides an alternate platform for asking policy-related questions. For instance, we have already engaged with the issue of power distribution reforms, where we were able to get together a cross-section of opinion on the different viewpoints around the discourse reform. Many of us do not engage with energy and economy issues, leaving them to technocrats and experts, largely because of the specializations required. However, it is very important to demystify and de-jargonize these subjects and untangle the jargons to uncover the truth. This forum is therefore also mandated to engage with specialists in economy and energy and civil society outside the parliament so as to allow an open, transparent, and comprehensive conversation on the policies of energy and economy. We hope that through this forum, we would remain vigilant on policy failures so as to not sleepwalk into a disaster that we did on account of private power policy. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2022, my constituency in Khairpur witnessed and experienced extraordinary flooding with more than half the district underwater for weeks. People lost their assets, their homes, their animals, and their crops. With the predicament of climate change before us, there's an urgent need to respond to the world's emphasis on alternative and renewable energy and the resources that can be tapped towards that end. But let me confess that there is very little understanding of energy transition. See, I got mixed up even with energy transition among the political and the elected representatives. For us, it means just 3 words: wind, solar, and hydel. And I know that that's a very, very naive assumption of what energy transition means. But if that is also what it means, among other things, it is already concerning that the integrated generation capacity expansion plan reveals a drastic reduction in renewable energy share. From the 30% in the previous plan, we are now looking at merely 12.9% by 2034. This shift violates the Alternative Renewable Energy Policy 2019, aiming for 30% renewable energy by 2030, and contradicts the National Electricity Policy 2021's least cost principle. In the coming days, as parliamentarians, we hope to raise these concerns within the parliament on backtracking on this important milestone. Ironically, out of all this pain of prohibitively expensive energy, the solar panel in Pakistan is emerging as the savior. As we debate energy transitions, people are racing to get solar systems on their rooftops. The aerial landscape of Pakistan is shifting, and people of Pakistan are taking this initiative in their own hands. For us politicians, the solar panel is the new offering to the people. Previously, we used to distribute the Silai machine, and now we have moved to the solar panel. Provincial governments are also offering attractively packed programs to low-income households. But again, the question is, where does this fit into the overall energy transition? And what really should be the policy to order this new lifestyle? I keep reading about the alternate pathways, which are ways and means the ideal of sustainable energy can be realized. What are these pathways? Are they about changing regulatory frameworks? Would they involve budgetary overhauls? Would they require new ways of production and consumption? Would they require overhaul of energy governance models? Would they end up relying more on subnational and local mechanisms? These are all the questions that we as parliamentarians need to learn from you present today. Our forum is open to all that is required to be done towards this end. Finally, I would also urge this forum with caution that while advocating for energy transition, we must frame it within the existing problem of the day-to-day lives of Pakistanis today. And that is access to cheap and affordable energy with renewable energy focus. Rather than making energy transition the objective must be access to sustainable, cheap, and affordable energy with people and their economic needs as a central focus. The founders of electricity dreamed of a world where electricity would be free and where it would be sourced from the abundance of nature in a sustainable way. Nikola Tesla, for instance, said, and I quote, "Electric power is everywhere, present in unlimited quantities, and can drive the world's machinery without the need for coal, oil, gas, or any of the common fuels." Let us together move towards such an ideal place. I thank you all for your patience.
Thank you, Dr. Nafisa, for your valuable insights. We are unable to reach our next prospective speaker, Senator Sanaullah Baloch, because of some technical difficulties. We will get him on board as soon as we reach him. Now I would like to call upon stage Malik Amin Aslam, former Minister for Climate Change. Mr. Malik is a Pakistani politician who has served as Federal Minister for Climate Change. He was awarded Tamgha-e-Imtiaz for his role in Billion Tree Tsunami Initiative. Mr. Malik has worked with the World Bank and UN on environmental issues. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Malik Amin Aslam.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Muhtarama Nafisa Shah Sahiba, Muhtaram Shahid Hassan Sahab, honorable ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. It's always a pleasure to be at LUMS. It's a place where when you come, you start thinking. And I think that's one of the rare rarities in Pakistan. So today we've been asked to talk about this issue of energy transition and what is the role that policymakers have in this very important aspect. I think this is one of the critical issues if we are to address the issue of climate change head on. And unless we address this issue, climate change is not going to go back. It is going to keep on coming forward. But to address this issue, I would like to start with a quote that vision without action is merely a dream. Action without vision is just passing time. But vision with action can change the world. And I think that is what is required when we talk of this very important issue of energy transition. And the aspect which turns a vision into action is the policy framework. And that is where the policy makers like Dr. Sahiba and myself, we come in. And we try to shape whatever vision there is so that there is action on the ground. Now, unfortunately, if you look at Pakistan, we unfortunately have been living in a country which is overburdened with policy. You know, there's a policy overload in Pakistan. And I have happened to go to a meeting in Korea where at the Green Growth Institute, and there was a book of indicators. So I was leafing through it, and Pakistan was, you know, lower on the rank on most of them. And then suddenly Pakistan was number one. And guess what the indicator was? The indicator was number of policies and strategies made, but not implemented. We were number one in that. So we unfortunately have been overburdened with policy, overburdened with strategy, and underrepresented when it comes to actual implementation of those policies. And that is where the fault lies in Pakistan. There is no lack of vision. You know, people have vision, they've shown their vision, and there's no lack of policy in Pakistan. But we need to follow with continuity the policies that we make in Pakistan. Now, the energy transition issue is a case in point. You know, energy transition issue was clearly delineated by Pakistan and presented to the world in what was called the NDC document in 2021. NDC is a naturally determined contribution. It is what all the countries of the world presented to the UN forum as their vision for the future in terms of how they're going to tackle climate change. And our NDC document was very clear. It was, you know, in fact, at that time, hailed as one of the clearest NDCs in the world, because it came out with clear quantified figures of where we wanted to go. We said in that document that Pakistan by 2030 would like to achieve 60% of its energy by renewable sources. And in these renewable sources, we included hydropower, which, you know, a large hydro was not considered part of renewable energy for some strange reason, but we pushed for that and we put it as part of the renewable ambit that it would include large hydro projects, 60% of our energy. And at the same time, on the transport side, we said that 30% of our transport by 2030, and the new transport that comes into Pakistan by 2030 would be based on electric vehicles. Again, a clean energy. And we also said that if we do these two things, and we are also doing, these things are going to reduce the amount of carbon we are producing. At that time, 2021, we were producing about 500 million tons of carbon in a year. So we would reduce that amount of carbon by 15% if we do these things on our own by 2030. But if the world really wants to help us, we are willing to reduce our emissions by 50% from business as usual. So we'll be willing to drop it by 50%, but that additional 35% will only come if we get an additional $100 billion of investment. And this investment would go primarily into energy transition. It would go into financing large hydro projects, which are zero carbon. It would go into wind, it would go into solar, and it would go into retiring of our existing coal-based and thermal-based power plants. Now that is where the interesting part is. So it was a very clear document. And it was hailed as such that you have given your figures, you've given your time frame, and you've given what you want the world to do to help you make that energy transition. And what happened at the COP meeting in Glasgow was that Asian Development Bank was coming forward at that time with a very novel idea. It was called the Energy Transition Mechanism. So it was actually a tool to make sure that the energy transition that we are saying we're going to do in Pakistan and in other countries also, it was a tool to make that happen. And it was a very novel idea. The idea was that if you have coal-based power projects like we have in Pakistan, and they have a life of 30 years or 40 years, this mechanism would provide you blended and concessional financing, so lower cost debt, so that you can reduce the life of that project from 30 years to 20 years, or less than that. So you shave off 10 years of a coal power project, and you shave off millions of tons of carbon that are going to go into the air. These are called avoided emissions. And they also get cost, and they can get capitalized through the carbon market. So it was a sort of a win-win project. It was a win-win idea. I really like that idea. We happened to have a meeting with the ADB head, and we said that, Pakistan would like to pilot it. We would like to be the first country in the world to do this. And he latched on to it. The agreement was signed, and Pakistan became one of the first 3 pilot countries, along with Indonesia, Philippines, it was Pakistan, and now Vietnam and Kazakhstan have also signed up. So this mechanism is very interesting because it, as I said, provides the tool and the financing to turn the vision into an action. So you're not just dreaming, but you're actually trying to do something on the ground. So, when you called me for this seminar, I called up the Asian Development Bank and I asked them, what happened? We had this excellent agreement. ADB actually also provided a fund, and I met our colleague from Pride, Badar Saab, and he was telling me, there was a follow-up also. The Asian Development Bank gave a pot of money and they said, okay, we will do a feasibility exercise for Pakistan to see which projects are eligible for this transition towards a low carbon phase out. And he sent me that report. I looked at that report. It had done a very good analysis of 2 aspects. One is the coal projects that we have. The other one are the thermal projects. And the report said that the coal projects are very young projects. Our oldest coal project is 6 years old. And these projects are still projects in which the debt has still to be paid off. So they have got large capacity payments coming up. And that is why we are facing this energy crisis right now, is because of those big coal projects and their debt that has to be paid off. But because the debt has to be paid off, this mechanism cannot kick in, because the energy transition mechanism comes in if you've gone to around like 12 years of your project life, and then till 25 years, it can come in and provide you financing which can offset the transition, and also make sure that the investors don't lose money. So the investors are also looked after. They don't lose money, but the world benefits because the project closes early and carbon emissions are saved for the world. So the coal projects, they have said, you know, the cost is very high, but the environmental benefit is also extremely high. And the environmental benefit, the report says, is about, if we close down early these projects, they will save Pakistan about 250 million tons of carbon a year. Just to give you an idea, 250 million ton means Pakistan's total emissions is 500 million ton. So 50% of those emissions will get dropped if you can close down these projects, but there is a cost to it. The energy transition mechanism can bear a part of that cost. The rest of the cost has to come from somewhere. But on the thermal projects, the report says that they did an analysis of all the thermal projects in Pakistan. And they looked at 5-6 criteria for this energy transition. And the criteria was that the project should be one where the utilization factor is very low, the capacity factor is very low, the power efficiency is low. So they're not efficient projects. And on the pecking order of them being taken up by the grid, they're on the lower pecking order. And secondly, these should be projects which are between 12 and 25 years old. So they should have spent about 12 years. And then they narrowed it down to 3 projects all around Lahore. I think it's Sapphire, Saf Power and Holborn Power, all 250 megawatts each. And they said that this can be done through the energy transition mechanism. We are willing to provide the finance. If these projects want to offset, close early, we will do that. But the environmental savings in this case was not that high. You know, the coal projects were saving about 250 million tons. This is going to save about 20 to 40 million tons of carbon. Still, you know, it is a step in the right direction. So that study was done. It came out with very clear results. But then, you know, nothing happened. Like in Pakistan, you know, when we go to ministries, I've been, you know, in the minister's office twice, and you see shelves full of strategies and policies lying there. Nothing is happening. So this again happened to go in that direction. So I would request Dr. Sahiba that, you know, she's heading this caucus of parliamentarians to haul up the ministry and ask them what happened to the energy transition mechanism. You had a report, you narrowed down the projects, get it done. You know, somebody needs to push it and get it done. And that is the critical role of policymakers. You know, just ending that, policymakers need to become champions. They need to have that vision, but then they also need to become champions of implementation. And when the two get together, things do happen on the ground. And, you know, you can start doing things and you can start making things happen. And I'll give you an example of, we were just talking about it. Dr. Saab, I don't know if he's sitting here or not, but Dr. Naveed at LUMS, he happened to just walk into my office in 2019 and he had a book in his hand. And he said, you know, the electric vehicle, we've done a lot of research in LUMS, and we have a document which is a policy document. You can turn it into a policy. So I looked at the document. It was a extremely well-researched document, something that if the ministry had outsourced somebody to do a policy paper for us, this is the best that could have come out. So I took it at that time, and we took it to our Prime Minister and we said, let's just announce an EV policy. This is everything which has been done. So we had the stakeholder meetings, and within 1 month of that book coming to our office, we had announced the EV policy. It was announced in 2019. And then there's a whole story which goes after that. I will not go into those details, but it just shows that, you know, if you have research institutes like LUMS providing the feedback to policymakers, and if the policymakers can have the vision and the initiative to take action, then things can happen in Pakistan. And I think that is what the lesson is. So on energy transition, I'm going to throw the ball in Dr. Sahiba's court, and I hope she can just take it. It's a जिस तरह पाकिस्तान में कहते हैं ना, देग है वो जो तैयार है खाने के लिए, तो इस देग को खोलें और खा लें, और I think something good can come out for Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malik, for your inspiring words. Now that we have cushion for some time, so we will have a brief question answer session. This session would be moderated by Dr. Majid Bilal, who is Program Manager of Just Energy Transition at Indus Consortium. Dr. Majid, over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you to our speakers for a very insightful discussion. So the floor is open for questioning, and we've got a bit of time, so feel free.
Hello, am I okay? My question is from Amin Aslam Saab. He talked about NDC document that is a policy framework and well written, a really impressive document. But my question is that what is the financing mechanism for those objectives? You set objective, you identify the target. Now, how to achieve those targets? There is a missing link of financing mechanism in that. So what was the plan for financing those objectives and those goals?
जी बिल्कुल, आपने बड़ा अच्छा क्वेश्चन किया। और एनडीसी के अंदर एक्चुअली हमने जो फाइनेंसिंग लिंक है वो भी प्रोवाइड किया था। उसमें हमने ये कहा था कि इफ द वर्ल्ड वांट्स अस टू गो ऑन बिजनेस एज यूजुअल, वी विल एंड अप इन अ पोजीशन ए, एंड हमारे लिए वो भी ठीक है। बट चूंकि हमने कुछ चीज़ें कमिट की हैं उसके अंदर, इसलिए उससे 15% कम हम अपनी फाइनेंसिंग के साथ करेंगे। एंड दीज वर थिंग्स व्हिच वर ऑलरेडी इन आवर प्लानिंग पाइपलाइन। आईजी साहब के साथ भी हमने बात की हुई थी। तो दीज वर थिंग्स जो कि 5 साल मंसूबे में प्लान की गई थी और पाकिस्तान ने खुद फाइनेंस करनी थी। बट वी सेड वी कैन जंप फ्रॉम 15% बिलो बिजनेस एज यूजुअल टू 50% बिजनेस एज यूजुअल। बट उसके लिए हमने $100 बिलियन की फाइनेंसिंग उसके अंदर लिखी हुई है कि अगर ये हमें मिलती है इसकी और कंसेशनल फाइनेंसिंग मिलती है, उसका दुनिया को भी फायदा होगा, हमें भी होगा। और उसके अंदर हमने फिर वो एयर मार्क किया हुआ है कि उसमें हाइड्रो पावर के लिए आई थिंक 50% ऑफ दैट इज फॉर large hydropower development, 20% is for renewable, then there's for the transport transition. So we have earmarked all of that, and that money at the international level at the moment is only peanuts are available. A very small amount of that is available.
I have another follow-up question, just very short. Like during those 2-3 years period of your, like when you were minister in charge, and that time, what was the allocation, budgetary allocation, the government's commitment for Ministry of Environment?
Ministry of Environment ki, when I came in, the development budget of the ministry was 400 million. And when I left, it was 15 billion. So, the government had shown a commitment. उसके अलावा in 2021 वर्ल्ड बैंक ने एक रिपोर्ट निकाली थी जिसमें उन्होंने ये कहा कि दुनिया के कौन से ममालिक हैं जो वर्ल्ड बैंक से पैसा लेते हैं और फिर उसको क्लाइमेट चेंज कंपैटिबल डेवलपमेंट के ऊपर लगाते हैं, और उसमें पाकिस्तान नंबर 1 आया था। 44% ऑफ आवर डेवलपमेंट मनी कमिंग फ्रॉम द वर्ल्ड बैंक वाज क्लाइमेट कंपैटिबल। सो वी हैड द विजन वाज क्लियर, एज आई सेड कि वो विजन था उसमें, और हमने जितनी कोशिश कर सकते थे कि उसको एक्शन में भी इम्प्लीमेंट किया जाए। पर इसमें कॉन्टिन्यूटी भी चाहिए होती है। यू कांट जस्ट लेट इट ड्राउन। continuity is required. I think जो डॉक्टर साहब ने इनिशिएटिव लिया कि मल्टी पार्टी कॉकस हो जिसमें कुछ चीज़ों पे इत्तेफाक होना चाहिए। क्लाइमेट चेंज इज वन ऑफ दोस थिंग्स जिसके ऊपर पॉलिटिक्स नहीं होनी चाहिए बल्कि कंसेंसस होना चाहिए।
That's good. Thank you. Thank you.
हर चीज आप अपने जिम्मे लेते हैं कि हम अगर कंटिन्यू करते हैं या जो अभी वाले हैं ये 10 साल और कंटिन्यू करेंगे तो मुल्क में बेहतरी होती है। ये क्यों नहीं है कि इदारे जो बने हुए हैं वो क्यों नहीं फंक्शन हम करने देते हैं उनको?
आई थिंक इट्स अ कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ बोथ। यू नीड अ कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ बोथ। और कुछ ऐसी मिनिस्ट्रीज हैं, एनर्जी की हो गई, क्लाइमेट चेंज, वाटर, यहाँ पे आपको टेक्निकल एक्सपर्टीज चाहिए जो कि ब्यूरोक्रेट्स की तरह आया जाए नहीं बल्कि परमानेंटली रहे, और उसी से कंटिन्यूटी आती है। आई थिंक सो यू नीड अ मैरिज ऑफ बोथ।
इसके लिए सर एक आया था चाइनीज में, यहाँ पाकिस्तानी था, चाइना में उसने काम किया था। वो आर्टिकल मेरे ख्याल में डान में छपा था या द न्यूज़ में छपा था, मैं एग्जैक्ट اس میں یہی تھا کہ جو ٹیکنیکل منسٹریز ہیں ہم نے ہر چیز کا جو ہے حل اینٹی بایوٹک میں رکھا ہے. جیسے بیوروکریسی ہے, ایک بندہ جو ڈسٹرکٹ مینجمنٹ کا جو چیمپئن ہے وہ ٹیکنیکل منسٹری, ٹیکنیکل ہیلتھ, انجینئرنگ, پبلک ہیلتھ, جو ہے نا رورل پلاننگ, یہ ساری جو ہے نا اربن پلاننگ, یہ اس میں جب ہم یہ سسٹم میں وہ چینجز نہیں لائیں گے, اس نے یہی کہا تھا کہ جب تک آپ سروسز کریٹ نہیں کریں گے, ڈیڈیکیٹڈ سروسز, انجینئرنگ ہیں تو وہ انجینئرنگ سروس سے ہی بندے لوگ ہیں اور پرماننٹلی ہے, وہ سیکریٹری ہے 6 مہینے کے لیے ہے کسی بھی کھاتے میں نا, منسٹری کسی بھی منسٹری میں 6 مہینے 8 مہینے یہ کر کے پھر کہیں سے کہیں بیٹھتا ہے. اور اسی طرح ڈپٹی سیکریٹری, ان کے سیکشن آفیسرز, ان کے مطلب پوری سسٹم ان کا یہی اسی طرح چلتا ہے. تو جب
Sir, your,
تک اس نے
excuse
چائنا
me,
ماڈل,
Sir,
چائنا
your point is well taken.
ہلو ٹوکے
اگر آپ brief answer مل جائے اور اس کے بعد if we could
we
go at the
agree
back.
with you.
اس میں سب NDC کے اندر اڈاپٹیشن اور میٹیگیشن کے میجرز اویلیبل ہیں, اور جو گلوبل فائنینسنگ اور ریجنل فائنینسنگ بھی اویلیبل ہے, وہ میٹیگیشن کے اوپر زیادہ فوکس ہے, پرائیویٹ فائنینسنگ بھی ہے. ویئر ایز کہ پاکستان کنٹری جہاں پہ اڈاپٹیشن کے اندر ہمارے کلائمیٹ کا افیکٹ ہمارے پاس زیادہ ہے, اس کے اندر بہت کم فوکس ہے ٹو مائی انڈرسٹینڈنگ, ایز یو ویری رائٹلی سیڈ کہ جہاں پہ ایشین ڈیولپمنٹ بینک میں ہم کول سے سٹارٹ ہوئے انرجی ٹرانزیشن پہ, اور ایٹ دا اینڈ جا کے لینڈ کر گیا یہ RFO کے 4-6 پلانٹ پہ جو ADB کے اندر آتے ہیں, رائٹ, وچ اگر اس کا دوسری سائڈ پہ دیکھیں گے وہ ہماری سسٹم کی ریلائبلٹی کے لیے شاید وہ امپورٹنٹ ہے آج کے سچویشن میں, جہاں پہ ہمارا ٹرانسمیشن انفراسٹرکچر اتنا روبسٹ نہیں ہے, جہاں پہ ایون وی ہیو انویسٹڈ ان کول آلسو بٹ وی چیپ کول وی وار انیبل ٹو یوٹیلائز. تو اس طرح کی ٹرانزیشن میں شاید ہماری ایپیٹائٹ جہاں پہ رینیویبل ڈسٹریبیوٹیڈ میں بھی بہت زیادہ آ گئی ہے, نیٹ میٹرنگ میں چلی گئی ہے, آف گریڈ میں چلی گئی ہے, اور پروونشل گورنمنٹ کے جو انیشیٹیوز ہیں آن دی سولرائزیشن, تو وہ چیزیں تو ایڈریس کر رہی ہے, بٹ اڈاپٹیشن والا جو ایسا اینگل ہے جس پہ ہمارا شاید لوکلی بھی اتنا فوکس نہیں ہے اور گلوبلی بھی وی آر انیبل ٹو اٹریکٹ دوٹ فائنینسنگ. تو اس میں آپ کا کمنٹ.
جی بالکل, یہ تو ایک جنگ ہے جو کہ ساری ڈیولپنگ کنٹریز لڑ رہی ہیں جب سے کلائمیٹ کی ٹاک شروع ہوئی ہیں کہ اڈیپٹیشن, پاکستان جیسا ملک جو ہے, یہ جو فلڈس کی بات کر رہی تھی ڈاکٹر صاحبہ, یہ اس کو ایڈریس کرنے کے لیے تو یو نیڈ اڈیپٹیشن فنڈس, اور اڈیپٹیشن کے فنڈس انفارچونیٹلی ایک اڈیپٹیشن فنڈ بنایا گیا تھا 5-6 سال پہلے, اس کے اندر بھی کوئی پیسے نہیں ہے, $100 ملین پڑے ہیں صرف. اور اس کے بعد پھر بڑی لڑائی کے بعد 2 سال پہلے ایک لاس اینڈ ڈیمیج فنڈ بنایا گیا, اور وہ اس کے اندر بھی اس وقت کوئی پیسے نہیں ہیں. سو آئی تھنک وہ ایک ہے لڑائی, پاکستان کا سانس ہمیشہ رہا ہے کہ ہمیں وہ اسی پہ پیسے چاہیے کیونکہ ہم افیکٹڈ ہیں اس سے, ہم نے پیدا نہیں کیا اس مسئلے کو, ہم اس سے افیکٹڈ ہیں. تو دیٹ فائٹ گوز آن, انفارچونیٹلی اس کی فنڈنگ اسٹل لمیٹڈ ہے, اور زیادہ تر میٹیگیشن کے اوپر ہی ہوتی ہے.
For now, we will be concluding the question and answer session, and we can address any question in the follow-up meeting outside. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Majid. It's time to call upon stage our special guest for today, Mr. Awais Ahmed Khan Laghari, Federal Minister, Ministry of Energy, Power Division. Mr. Awais is the current Federal Minister of Energy in Pakistan. With previous experience as the Federal Minister for Power, Mr. Laghari has been actively involved in Pakistan's energy sector. During his tenure, he worked on addressing Pakistan's energy challenges and advancing energy sector reforms. Mr. Laghari has also served multiple terms in both the national and provincial assemblies. Please welcome Mr. Laghari. Thank you.
How much time do I have? How much is there? 2 minutes? They just informed, Assalamu alaikum, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. They just informed me I have About half an hour to about what? You want me to speak that long? People might go off to sleep. Anyway, I'll try to put across whatever I think is important and try to explain to you what kind of a situation the power sector and the energy sector of Pakistan is at the moment, at least the way we see it, in through the lens of the so-called government of Pakistan and the policy makers. So first of all, thank you so much, LUMS and Pakistan Renewable Energy Coalition for having hosted this and gotten all the experts together. I'm still a student of the energy sector. I don't have any engineering degree. My only relationship with the sector was when I was a minister for a year in 2017. And then I was given this responsibility by the government now, this time about 6 months ago. So I'll try to put before you, first of all, the excess baggage that we have to work with, and we have on us as a liability, all the fault lines that prevail in the power sector, and then try to fit the renewable part as something that could get the country's energy dilemma to be resolved and sorted out. So first of all, we've inherited an extremely expensive and unsustainable the power sector. The costs are way too much. It's not competitive in the region. The generation cost of electricity is way too high. We're okay on the transmission and the distribution side as far as the costs are concerned. But on the generation side, it's too much. It's not affordable. When we sit down with IPPs to discuss as to what they can do about it and what we could do about it and what we could mutually come to as an understanding and try to get the tariffs to be rationalized, they do also accept that, yes, it's not sustainable. When the demand is going down by the day, we had some calculations that we did the other day, and somebody informed me that August, year on year, demand for the industry has gone down by more than about 15%. That is scary. So with these kinds of things, we inherited the power sector with these conditions. So we're looking at reduction in the taxes. We're looking at bringing in more efficiency into the transmission systems by investing into the key constraints that our transmission sector faces today. And there are many of them. And the removal of these constraints could actually translate into a reduction in the price for the consumer. That could also translate into more efficient usage of indigenous resource, may it be fossil fuel or clean energy or hydel or solar or wind. We are already curtailing wind power as we speak. The cheaper plants on the local coal are not being dispatched because of lack of transmission infrastructure. And even the hydel part, if you don't go all out and invest into certain transmission lines that could help evacuate the power coming in from the upcoming hydel projects, Pakistan would be seriously facing issues within the next 1 or 2 years. So the efficiency within the transmission system is being looked at as one of the key reforms in the power sector. We are trying to get the furnace oil part of the generation out of the system. We've already started negotiating with about 5 IPPs, which are producing power on furnace oil. We've already started speaking to the others who would be shifted on to a take and pay kind of a regime instead of us paying heavy capacity payments for. The power sector reforms also include very aggressive work that has been initiated on the DISCO privatization part of it. Three companies have already been offered to the Privatization Commission to go ahead with the transaction. The financial advisor should be in place next month. So by the middle of next year, you should have 3 distribution companies privatized. And by the end of next year, you should have another 2 companies that would have been given out on the concession agreement model, which is Sakkar and Hyderabad. So out of the 10 distribution companies, at least half or a little more than half should have been privatized by the end of next year. Therefore, plugging the holes that exist within the distribution sector, which is a constant drain of close to 600 billion rupees on the national exchequer, and it is really stifling the growth and the amount of money that we could invest into the public sector development program. We are also making very good progress on the competitive energy markets. An entity that's supposed to be created called the Independent System Market Operator, that's supposed to extract 2 very important parts of NTDC and CPPA out and form one company, which is the ISMO, which would be the basis of competitive markets to operate on. That is, the summary has been sent to the Prime Minister and for the Cabinet to consider. So within the next 1 month, we should hope to have this ISMO registered and operational with NTDC and CPPA's existing workforce contributing into the company. So ISMO, the creation of ISMO would then help us move towards realizing the dream of wheeling energy on an efficient basis to the bulk consumers in the first phase and to others in the next. This was actually committed by the Power Division to happen in the year 2009, but still has not been a reality for us. So we are hoping that inshallah within the next 1 year or so, we should have the bulk consumers actually having an environment in place where they could buy renewable and efficient power from producers, and that power could be, those electrons could be wheeled all the way to the premise of these businesses. And the competitive market, we are hoping that in the next 3 to 4 years would evolve and mature into something that could translate into the real bilateral energy market that could bring down the price of energy and could remove us or extract us from this kind of an environment where CPPA could be the only buyer. So that's the only way to push Pakistan out of the single buyer model. And then we're also investing and hoping to invest a lot. We've already started talking to the Chinese investors to convert our imported coal plants into local coal-based plants. And we started running the studies and the feasibilities and the economic and the technical and the financial feasibilities for this conversion. And we hope that our energy mix could be the energy price of power itself could really come down substantially because of this. This might have an impact of close to 2 rupees per unit as far as the energy price of the entire pool is concerned. We are also aggressively investing into something called a power information system. We have a company called PITC, but the role of PITC has been just restricted to offering billing services to the distribution companies, and that's about it. PITC needs to evolve or be converted into the repository of real-time and very properly verified and the credibility data, because data in the power sector is the most important thing and is the key. Unfortunately, even us policymakers at times have serious concerns on the credibility of the data that we have actually provided from time to time. So we are trying to set in place a system within the next year where PITC could be the repository for the entire power sector's data that could then use analytical tools to be able to come up with good, proper suggestions and policy interventions for the policymakers to make. The most important part of our reforms is to set in place an efficient technical arm of the power division. The power division needs to make serious policy interventions from time to time. It's not just once in 6 months or once in 3 months, but almost on a weekly basis, we are faced with situations where we need to make a policy decision one way or the other. For these policy decisions to be made, we need technical expertise. These technical expertise are unfortunately not available to us. We rely on World Bank giving us some consultants from time to time, helping us through the technical assistance programs that they are able to fund for us. The Asian Development Bank doing that, the USAID doing that. But there is no in-house facility available in the form of technical expertise, which could actually support the power division to make all the key policy decisions. There are secretaries that we have, there are additional secretaries and joint secretaries, and then political people or the technocrats in the form of ministers and SAPMs and ministers of state. But I don't think we are all armed enough with the expertise that are required to handle and to take forward this very complex power sector. I don't think if we continue to do or make, if we continue to have policy interventions based on just hearsay, which has been, by the way, happening in the past. In the past 3 or 4 decades, there has not been a considered, well thought out, researched way of even adding generation capacity to the profile that we have, that exists today. It's all been done in a rush all the time. Pakistan used to face all the load shedding that we used to in the past, and every government was in a hurry to do something within the next 2 to 3 years and try to get Pakistan out of it and get the political so-called constituency of theirs to clap for us, appreciating that we've ended load shedding, but at what cost? What energy mix have we been investing into? What is going to be the future? What happens if the indigenous part of that energy mix is not enough to provide Pakistan the kind of energy security that Pakistan must have? So all these things require proper technical information, use of complex softwares and applications that are used elsewhere in the world. Then we've also been relying on growth projections that might have been just a dream for us. So all the demand projections in the future that Pakistan has made in the past have all been at, say, an assumption of 6% growth rate. So when that 6% is not actually achieved, the demand is not actually materialized, and then we end up in capacities that are unutilized, and the rest of the pool of consumers being burdened with that unutilized capacity. We're also looking at seriously bringing in an environment where the tariff slabs in Pakistan are absolutely uniform. We need to give out a bill that clearly states that every consumer needs to build a certain amount according to a certain rate. And then whoever needs to be subsidized needs to be through a social protection program for people to be in the, for people not to easily exploit this kind of a tariff slab structure that exists within Pakistan. Then we're also looking at, we're not just looking at, all these things are happening, by the way. In the past 6 months, the kind of progress that we've made in all these power sector reform areas has been has been extremely encouraging. And the people at the Power Ministry and other professionals were actually helping us. They have a key role to play in this. Then we're also pursuing an aggressive program on the energy conservation side. I think MD Nika would have spoken on this platform earlier this morning. Nika has been tasked to come up with this program that we're about to roll out next month. Although it's not a good time to roll out this program because usage of fans would be going down up in the northern parts of the country. But at least in the south, it will start picking up. So we are looking at a conservation program where fans could be made more efficient, that could bring down our so-called peak demand by a good few thousand megawatts if this transition actually happens over the next few years. We have a very unhealthy demand curve. So we actually peak out, and most of the peak that happens over and above the 11,000 so-called megawatts of demand that exists in the country is all fans and air conditioners and inefficient building codes that Pakistan has in place. So the energy conservation part of it would really in the long term help Pakistan achieve a much healthier demand profile that could help the policy makers avoid any investments into energy that are not required for a productive manner and in a consistent enough manner. So I'll just give you an example. There are about 3,500 megawatts that are there in place in our entire generation capacity that are used just for about 200 hours or 250 hours in a year out of the 8,760 hours in a year. So this is the luxury and the cost of luxury that one has to pay. And this is something that Pakistan and the power sector of Pakistan can't really afford. So we've also, by the grace of God, reached a point where NTDC, the transmission arm of the power sector, is going to be now split up into 3 parts. We're not happy with the way the projects are rolled out and they're actually developed and then handed over to the asset management part of NTDC and the operations part. So we are actually going to be making another company by the name of NGC, the projects. That will be a very slim and efficient company with very top-class professionals in it. And we are going to adopt an outsourcing kind of a model where the rollout and implementation of projects that are much required for transmission to come into place. In spite of having all the funds available, most of our transmission projects are delayed by over 4 to 6 years. That's very unfortunate. Every day that the projects are actually delayed, it's adding on to the cost of electricity for the consumer. So the 660 transmission line that the Chinese invested into, that's been underutilized for years now, just because the Lahore grid project has not come into place. So the NGC project part of NTDC would ensure that we don't have any such problems occurring in the future. Then the other part of NTDC would be a part of the independent system market operator, who would be responsible for all the planning of the future energy that Pakistan needs to have and needs to buy. Now, who does that? I'll just give you a little flavor of what the situation is right now. So there's something called IGCEP. IGCEP is a way a software and a way in which these professionals like Dr. Fyaz sit down and other people in NTDC. So they feed in all these assumptions into the software. And those on the basis of those assumptions, the software actually comes up with the least cost, the methodology based requirement for power in the future. So now I'm not talking of the previous power plants that already exist in the system. Now I'm talking of the future, the committed plants that Pakistan has already inked contracts with. You'll be very happy to know, as far as clean energy is concerned, that the next 17,000 megawatts of plants being added on to our profile are all hydel or nuclear. So one nuclear, everything else is hydel. So it's all clean energy. So we don't have anything to worry about in that sense. But it's not on a least cost methodology. So out of the 17,000 megawatts of plants that we are supposed to add on, that we cannot avoid adding on, that we've already committed, this is also excess baggage that we have, only 87 megawatts fulfill the criteria of least cost basis. That is scary. What do we need to do about it? So we started having a very serious look at the future plants that are supposed to come on to our profile and see what could be done and what part of the cost of those plants need to be drawn out of the pool of the amount that needs to be, that the consumers would be ultimately burdened with. So we need to nationalize that part of the debt or investment that's going into every plant. For instance, the Mohmand Dam project, it's about to be completed. We've already spent money. The tariff of this Mohmand Dam has not been trued up and it's not available to the plant. But we know that's going to be very expensive. So who takes the burden of it? Why should the consumer take the burden of it? The consumer should only expect the government to invest into plants that are there on the least cost methodology. So we've reopened the entire discussion within the Power Ministry regarding the least cost methodology. So from within TCEP, this IGCEP, there's another very important part, which is the transmission planning part. So what kind of transmission systems need to be invested into where, what parts of the country, what load centers need to be fed with what kind of energy. Here comes the role of the transmission system to be able to accommodate good, healthy, renewable, clean energy. Unless we have a transmission system that can support future technologies and renewables coming into the system that are going to be brought into place in a very distributed manner, with the battery prices going down, with the solar prices going down, with individuals investing into such power producing small IPPs of 10 kilowatts and 1 megawatt and half a megawatt in the future. When the batteries costs start coming down, that's when the base load part of Pakistan's issues could also have another very serious problem. So I don't want to call it a problem, it might be a good problem to have, that are so-called base load plants that are based on fossil fuel would be then replaced by the so-called battery storage that could be economically and feasibly available for people to start throwing back into the system. I'll also like to now share some facts with you. So we did a little bit of stock taking. Pakistan doesn't have any issues as far as the generation part is concerned of the energy being clean or not. We are fairly clean. So when they talk, when I was going through the concept note that this energy conference had authored, they talked about, well, the region having 68% fossil fuels. Pakistan is 54%. Pakistan is 54% clean energy right now. So last year, we produced all the energy that was produced in Pakistan, 54% was from clean sources. This is going to go up to 82% by the year 2034. This is not just a dream. This is according to the profile that Pakistan has already committed to in a more expensive manner. So hydropower that we were investing into is not cheap. And the international community, when they finance such projects, which is another very important part of this conference today, they don't care whether you're investing into clean energy or not. They are financing your projects which are absolutely front loaded. They have extra insurance costs on Pakistan. The country risk part of it. These projects are burdened with high insurance costs, high interest rates, irrespective of whether we invest into clean energy. So no financial institution has ever come to Pakistan or an IPP's owner who's investing into clean energy and said, hey, you are investing into clean energy, I'm going to give you a concessional rate or even a rate that I'm giving in other countries. But since your country risk is higher, since whatever else, you will be charged a lot more. And they do not finance us even over the period of the project itself, over the life of the project. So all these projects are front loaded. So the tariffs, we might be having a levelized tariff over the year of the project, but the first 12 years are front loaded. So all that debt needs to be paid back and serviced by us, irrespective of whether it's a coal project or a hydro project or a solar project or a wind project over the first 10 years, thus making every injection of power into the system an expensive way to do it. So this is where the financial institutions and the so-called climate change, the gurus of this world, this is the way Pakistan has been treated in the past, in spite of taking the brunt of it all in terms of climate change. So 11 floods in the past 8 to 9 years of catastrophic scale. Pakistan has gone through all that. And unfortunately, nobody cares. So I'm sure such events would be able to draw the attention of financiers who are there in the region to be looking at Pakistan and being a little more fair to us than they are. As far as the fossil fuels are concerned, in the next 8 to 9 years, we would be reducing the fossil fuel part of our energy to produce power from 46 to 18%. I'm not talking of combustion engines. I'm not talking of transport. I'm just talking of the power sector, the portfolio. So on the power sector side, the fossil fuels contribution to energy on an annual basis would come down from 46 to 18 by the year 2034. We also would be increasing our energy profile of the indigenous based energy from 75 to 94% by the year 2034. I've also been given this figure by a researcher in my office that you would be knowing about this a lot more, that Pakistan in terms of per capita emissions is quite low. It's not as high as the other countries are, and in spite of being low, we are taking the brunt of climate change impact across the country every year, in fact, every month of every year. So in my humble opinion, our energy transition needs to be looked at in the context of overall economic transition. That's very important. We need to also focus on trying to bring down the cost of our base load. The cost of base load is absolutely key and critical to us. When you're looking at, when we financially model the entire power sector tariff, we have to take into consideration this. We need to bring down our indigenous, we need to increase our indigenous base load, need to have it cheaper, and we need to save foreign exchange. So these are the underlying principles on the basis of which then we do the rest of our policy making. Last year, Pakistan imported more than 60 gigawatts of solar panels into the country. We are expected to add on over 1,200 megawatts on our solar net metering systems on the grid every year from now until 2034. That is quite significant. And this increases this forces us to start looking at and investing into and redesigning our grid for distributed renewables to be added on into the system. The battery prices, as I said, are going down. It might be within the next 4 to 5 years, going completely off grid on battery systems would be absolutely economically feasible. Our grid needs to actually evolve for the future, keeping these technologies in mind. We are wanting to move away from fossil fuels, but in a healthy and affordable and responsible manner. You'll be very happy to know that just about 3-4 days ago, we also have approved, we're about to announce it in the next 2-3 days. We've approved the EV regulations for battery swapping stations and EV charging stations. We are also involved and are closely working with the Ministry of Industries to come up with some policy guidelines for the regulator to consider an electronic vehicle electricity tariff that could further encourage people to move from combustion engines to electrically driven vehicles, especially for the two-wheelers and the three-wheelers. That's where the real saving is. That's where I've been told we are spending about $4 to $5 billion a year on the import of fossil fuels every year. That's where so in my humble opinion, it's not the generation part of power that needs all the attention for finances to look at Pakistan and climate change on. I think it's more on the mobility of electrons and the offtake of these electrons in the form of electric vehicles that needs the attention of the finances to put in money in a concessional manner and in a market competitive manner inside our country. So these were the key things that I thought would be interesting to share with you. We're actually also wanting to bring in or introduce specific programs that could get people to move from the so-called grid onto more renewable solutions. That is the appetite these days of most provinces. But we need to be very careful on how we do it and do it in a very responsible manner. I made some calculations. Our people made some calculations the other day. So if you give in the form of subsidy solar panels to people who are spending more than 200 units in a month or between 200 and 500 units, getting that customer off grid to the extent of the power being produced by those solar panels actually has a negative effect on your economy and on the kind of expense that we have to incur. So every 1.2 kilowatt solar system that is given free of cost to somebody who is between the 300 and the 500 unit slab adds on a burden of 87,000 rupees every consumer, 87,000 rupees on the grid. So the rest of the entire pool of customers get an impact of 87,000 rupees for every customer that this kind of an investment is made into. The other thing is the Solargy net metering part. I'd love to speak on this. There was so much hue and cry a few months ago when we had started discussing the possibility of tweaking some of the regulations on solar net metering, that we just had to keep quiet because the budget was on its way and there were other political implications to it. But I don't think we'll be able to keep quiet anymore. There has to be a responsible transition towards a healthier solar net metering regulation. This regulation is not sustainable anymore. So I was the one who actually started the solar net metering program and environment in this country back in 2017. I very clearly remember they never used to allow anybody to do it. So trying to get a green meter was a very big issue. It's become a big issue now too because of more demand and less supply of green meters probably. But it was a regulatory issue at that time. So we had encouraged it. It's had a very healthy growth, but not anymore. So I'll just give you some numbers. If you continue to have the same regulations and the pricing structure for solar net metering system that you have now for the existing ones, and you do not disturb their contracts, and we plan not to do that. So anybody's contract that we've signed with the solar net meter owner is going to be there until the expiry of that contract period. So nobody's going to touch that. So whoever's invested into it will keep on getting returns on the same rate that they are actually getting right now. But if we continue to add the next 1200 megawatts every year onto the solar net metering systems at the same regulations and the prices, this will cost the rest of the pool. And who is the rest of the pool? They're the poor people. Who are these solar net meter owners? They're rich people. There are 125,000 solar net metering owners in this country right now. All of them are upper income level classes. They're not even mid income level classes. So the next year, if another 1200 megawatts is added, just the impact of that 1200 megawatts according to the regulations that existed today would be 46 billion rupees a year, which translates into 46 paisas per unit cost across the pool of users of this country. And the year after that, you add on another 1200 megawatts and it'll go up to 88. And in the year 2027, your overall pool price of electricity would be 1.5 rupees more expensive, and they'll be subsidizing these 200,000 or 300,000 solar net meter owners. So the poor guys and the exchequer of Pakistan would be providing a windfall income to these solar net meter owners. So we're not wanting to completely finish this off at all. We want this to continue. We want distributed renewable energies to keep coming onto the system, but in a healthy manner. So what we're planning to do is, we're still working on it. Hopefully we should be done very soon. And then it's up to the federal cabinet to approve it or not. What we're wanting to do is that we bring down the prices, or the regulations are changed to a point where the payback period for any solar net metering system is about 4.5 to 5 years, which is a very reasonable one. Right now, it's much less than that. So, but we can't continue the way we are right now. So those were the some of the things that I thought were important to mention. If I forgot to say something that's of interest to you, please feel free to ask me in the question and answer the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Lagari. and we'll go towards a short question and answer session. So I would like to welcome Dr. Khalid Waleed to moderate that session, and just to reiterate the norms that we set in the beginning. So please be respectful with your questions, please be concise, be wary of the time limit, and over to you, Dr. Khalid.
Thank you so much, Hamara. Thank you so much, Minister Saab, sir, your presence and your insightful remarks and discussion. The floor is open. We can go one by one. Maybe Hissam, yeah. Please, you can give mic to Hissam, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for the very insightful overview of what the government is doing to address the crisis that we face today. You mentioned grid needs, the grid needs to evolve in the, for the future. And I think part of that is what we're talking about today, which is, the impacts of climate change. So I'm very curious to understand how you're thinking about the adaptation and resilience of the grid infrastructure in the context of the future. Thank you.
Well, I'm not an engineer at all, and I don't know about the technical details of it. But my belief is that whoever is responsible for this planning and transition, and to be looking into the future and the technologies that are expected to come onto the grid and then prepare the grid for it, that is an entity called NTDC. Now, the board of NTDC and the corporate governance principles that the government needs to adopt in a very professional manner. The better the board that we have and the better the management that we have, the better the planning that will take place. So the creation of this independent system market operator into a world-class company, I think CPPA, Mr. Lodhi is here. He oversaw the transition or the creation of CPPA for many years. I think the creation of this so-called planning company and the way it thinks and plans, that will play a very important and critical role in the grid evolving into a grid that is prepared to add on more power in a distributed and in a renewable energy kind of a manner. So it all depends on the performance of NTDC. And I've given this responsibility, well, the federal cabinet approved it. Dr. Fiaz is now chairing the board of NTDC. I think he's a senior advisor here at LUMS also. And they have good board members, so hopefully they've already started working on it, and they'll make sure that the transition happens in a responsible and good manner.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the lady over there, please.
Right. First of all, thank you for engaging with academics, researchers, and civil society organizations here. I have two questions, basically. You said that your government is basically right now trying to shift to local coal, and the local coal right now, and it would reduce the cost by 2 rupees. Have you looked at the cost, the people-centric and ecological cost in your costing mechanisms, considering that the harm to ecology of coal mining would be huge, and local and indigenous communities in Jamshoro and Third have been protesting and demanding a coal phase out?
We've already made investments into imported coal plants. They have a certain level of emissions. Those were all worked out, and the environmental impact was also calculated at the time. Now, these plants are a sunk cost to the nation. They're already in place. You and I are both paying a heavy amount of capacity payments for just these 3 imported coal plants. They're hardly being dispatched. The load factor of these plants is, one of the plants is about 11%, the other is 15%, the third is about, Sahiwal is about 30-35%. We need to improve the load factor of it, and we need to shift it from imported coal to local coal without incurring any added emissions and further deterioration of the climate, of the environment. We've already requested the Asian Development Bank, which the ADB actually funded one of the imported coal plants at Jamshoro, which is about to go into operations now. And just about a year or so ago, the ADB decided not to fund and finance any more coal plants. But we are stuck with this plant now. We now need to make sure that it's operated at the most optimum level. And we have our own environment, and we have our, there's not just one strategy that could fit all nations. I have a foreign exchange issue. I have the cost of energy issue, but we are going to make sure that the conversion does not deteriorate the environment condition any further. So unless we are completely convinced through proper credible studies that we are in the process of making, this conversion will not happen. It'll only happen if it's as good or bad, or even in some kind of an improved form, if we could make this conversion.
Yep. Okay, a couple of more questions, one from here and one from here. Zubair, maybe? Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. Honorable Minister Sahab, my name is Zubair Khan. I basically belong to Quetta, Balochistan. I wanted to ask you about the IGSEP and TSEP, as you mentioned, and it reflects that Balochistan has been neglected in the TSEP and IGSEP. So I wanted to ask you that why. It has huge potential of renewable energy and currently issue of electricity accessibility overall in the province. So please.
If you ask me, IGSEP and the TSEP should not have any so-called political or provincial considerations going into the assumptions part at all. This is what has harmed the country in the past. So the CCI used to dump projects on to the national grid and the CPPA just because they had to have a provincial flavor to it. Even your regulator, as we speak today, there are members of the regulatory authority that are just plonked on to the regulator, to that organization, because they belong to a certain province. They can belong to a certain province, but they have to have a certain amount of expertise, and they have to have some sectoral experience and expertise to be able to do whatever they're supposed to be doing at the regulator. As far as Balochistan is concerned, I'm sure in the future, all TSEP and IGSEP planning will ensure that any power that is added on is on a least cost methodology. If Balochistan is picked up by the software, let that be Balochistan then. If some other area is picked up, let that be that particular area. But as far as our obligation to provide reliable energy to the people of this country is concerned, to that extent, yes, we need to spend that extra amount of money through subsidy programs where we could get electricity to reach Balochistan. We just converted, the Prime Minister approved a 50 billion rupee project to convert our grid-based fuel systems into solarized systems because it wasn't affordable for us anymore to keep them on the grid. They just don't pay the money. We are wanting them to solarize the systems and get out of the grid because I can't afford to make a loss of 111 billion rupees every year on just 28,000 customers who are on the national grid extracting water out of the ground.
Okay, yeah.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. This is Rimsha Rehan, and I am a researcher at Policy Research Institute for Equitable Development, right? And my question to you is that you've mentioned that we are already in negotiations with almost like 5 IPPs. But my question here is that since we do research with the power sector in terms of IPPs as well, what we observe is that there are many power plants that are government owned. So has the government also been thinking about how does the government's own power plants that are idle right now, not generating any electricity, what are we going to do about the capacity payments made to them? And specifically, since they're dollar index, so why does the government have the need to be paid itself in the form of US dollars facing the current economic crisis? So this is my first question. And my second question is regarding the your point on the privatization of discos. So you said that we're considering the privatization of 3 discos by the next year and following 2 more. But I want to ask, were there any other alternative models that was considered by the government rather than straight away privatization? Because what we researched and what I specifically studied, for example, the Turkish model or the concessionary model, management model that you have mentioned, was not a complete success in the case of Turkey. And similarly, even in Argentina, which they implemented, and one reason was that they did not have straight regulatory bodies before the privatization even took place. So if the government is considering the privatization of these 3 discos, is there a program or some planning done on the regulatory aspects, such as in India? They follow also a privatization and a concessionary model, but they have specific state regulatory bodies that are dealing with them. So these are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. I think you're quite well researched, mashallah. On the Turkish model, that's the concession agreement part. The Turks have gone into privatizing their discourse on the concession agreement model. 3 or 4 of the 11 or 15 discos that they had, aage se zara hat jate. 3 or 4 of the discos in Turkey have not had the kind of results that they were expected. But those are in specific regions of Turkey. So it's the Kurd area where maybe the government's rate is not as much as other areas. But overall, the concession agreement model in Turkey has been a success. We are working very closely with the World Bank. And the World Bank is actually, we are consulting the World Bank as we speak. There's a weekly meeting that I hold in which we are looking at bringing into place all the conditions precedent to the privatization to actually happen. So we would be bringing into place an environment that would ensure that we don't repeat the Karachi Electric kind of a privatization. And we learn from that experience. So we are looking at issues like whether there should be a uniform tariff across Pakistan or not, whether the tariff differential subsidies could be handed over to the discos that get privatized and not to the ones that have not been privatized, or vice versa, whether the other retailers of electricity, when do they actually enter the market? So when do we start giving our consumers the option of having somebody else come and sell the power to them through the CTBCM mechanism to buy a power and then hand it over to the retailer, to the end consumers. So all these points are being considered as we speak. There's a very strong group of professionals who are a part of it. We are constantly in dialogue with the World Bank. I think our deliverables would be given to us very soon. And then we would hand over the so-called regulatory environment in case we need to make any changes after doing that to the financial advisor. The financial advisor would then have a look at the market and give us a feedback on that. And it's then that we would go in for the actual EOI for the transactions to happen. Now we're doing 3 discos on the privatization model. So a shareholding would actually be, we would disinvest. And the others would be the concession agreement model. So Sakkar and Hyderabad are going on the concession agreement model. Gujranwala, Islamabad and Faisalabad, they're going on the privatization model. So we are wanting to not repeat the mistakes that we made in the past. And we're also going to be responsibly bringing into place an environment that could help this market transition towards a private distribution sector based market. What is the first question about? IPPs. We're looking at everything on the IPP side. I also appreciate the fact that 70% of our generation is by government-owned plants. So the return on equity that these plants are receiving is under review. So this also would have a fair enough impact on the tariff structure. So please try to understand, there is no one thing that we could do that could bring down the tariff considerably. So we have to harvest these 50 paisas and 70 paisas and 1 rupee 10 paisas. The biggest chunk is in the sales tax part. So that is also under consideration. But we had the IMF program going and we need to consult our development partners. We need to make arrangements for the same amount of resources to be raised elsewhere, because this would create a dent of a good 600 to 700 billion rupees a year. So who gets to pay for that? And this is offloaded from the tariff structure. And then we're also looking at reprofiling of the CPEC debt. That would again have an impact of about 3.5 rupees. So if the $8.5 billion CPEC debt of IPPs is reprofiled, and we're looking at different options of reprofile. So there could be a moratorium of the principal amount for a few years and the extension of the tenure of the debt. So we're looking at all these options, and hopefully within the next year, we are realistically expecting for the prices to come down to a very regionally competitive level.
Yeah. Just last two questions, Faisal Saab and then that lady in back. Yep.
Thank you, sir. My name is Faisal Javed Mughal, and I'm from LUMS Energy Institute. First of all, sir, thank you very much for giving us your valuable time. I would like to appreciate your view of the decision, especially the board of directors. Your decision regarding board of directors is highly commendable. But sir, the situation at the grassroots level is still the same. I mean, still at the consumer end, if you want to, install electricity collection, you need telephone call. And same the case for industrial zones. It is very difficult to get the electricity connection. Secondly, Energy Efficiency Building Code 2023. Where is the implementation? Still, in the provinces, situation is very serious. Development authorities are even not prepared for that. Even then, the chief secretary or the relevant, authorities have no clue about that SRO, which has been approved from the cabinet. So my question is that how can you just improve the things without industrialization, without ease of doing business? So you're doing great work, no doubt. So please, what is the situation at grassroots level? Thank you.
So can we take one more question and then we can, yeah, please. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. First of all, thank you so much for your insightful thoughts, and we really enjoyed your session. So Bushraman is here, and my question is that we are continuously talking that we should make the best policies for climate action, for energy transition, etc. But we see that we always fail to implement that. That's the actual issue. So my question is, how can we design policies that will maximize social benefits and opportunities across all the segments of society, and that's also easy to implement?
Industrial
We
zones.
talked of distribution companies and the way they deal with customers and their customer care. Sitting next to you is an honorable parliamentarian. I hold her in the highest of respect. She just messaged to me this morning complaining about the Sakhar Electric Company being unfair to the consumers there and not doing things that it should be actually doing and not resolving and addressing the complaints that come to it. Do you know that we do not have a complaints registration system across this coast? So there is this PITC that has a number called 118. I haven't ever called the 118 number to register a complaint. And it never gets resolved if I do that. So We are pushing the boards, and it's all the responsibility of the boards. And I've given them three basic priority areas are the following: customer care, bringing down the losses, and preparing themselves for the privatization. These are the three key priority areas for all the distribution companies across the country. So it's just been a month or two since they've been in place. I would want to give them the time to be able to roll out a program that could address all these three issues on a priority basis. We'll be happy to know that within the next 1 or 2 days, the trial run of the 118 system would start. And within the next 2 to 3 months, we'll be equipped enough to start taking all the complaints that people register on the system. But there wasn't any system beyond the call center. So there wasn't an SDO. There wasn't a mechanism where on the SDO basis the complaint could go, get registered, and they had to resolve it according to the regulators' time frame given for the redressal for that complaint. So we are laying a lot of emphasis on the customer care. What was the other part of the question? NHD code. Yes, I talked to MD Nika about 3 days ago. I don't think even the Pakistan Engineering Council has adopted that code. So the PEC needs to adopt that code first. Then it needs to be raised up to the CCI level, which I have taken as a responsibility onto myself. I'm going to raise it at the CCI level, and then for the federal government and all the provincial governments to take that up as an emergency, as a national emergency. So this building code needs to be put in place and strictly adhered to for us to have this horrible, abnormal peak demand curve that we have in our country of just fans and air conditioners. So this demand needs to come down. At the same time, the healthy demand part of it needs to go up. That can't go up unless I bring down the price of electricity. The price of electricity needs to come down within the next few months to a point where the demand starts picking up. It's going down by over 15 to 20% as we speak. But आपने जो वो social benefit की बात की, it's all about the pricing of electricity. So electricity needs to be affordable and reliable for anyone in society to be able to use and use in an efficient manner. One other thing that I want to say, which I forgot, was the energy equation. It's not just the power sector. It's oil and gas part of it also. So we are having another look at the entire profile of gas reserves that we have, of indigenous gas, of RLNG. Why can't there be a uniform price of gas in this country? Why should the fertilizer wala get it at another rate and somebody else at another and the consumer at another? Whoever the government needs to subsidize could give them a subsidy through a social protection program. So there needs to be in place. The most important part is that there needs to be in place a uniform price for gas that is being made available to the consumers, irrespective of what kind they are. And there needs to be a shift from inefficient use of gas to efficient use of gas, which is shifting it to the power sector, and then the electricity to be used for space, heating, and cooking purposes in this country. So we are also having a holistic approach as far as the best ways to utilize gas is also concerned, along with the petroleum division.
Yeah, thank you so much, Minister Saab. A round of applause for your questions and a round of applause for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And may I request? May I request, Mr. Sir, if you could remain here for just 2 more minutes. So may I request Mr. Shahid Hussain, Rector LUMS, Mr. Tariq Juddoon, Provost LUMS, Dr. Ali Chima, VC LUMS, Dr. Fiaz Chaudhry, Chairman, Board of Director, NTDC, Mr. Badr Alam, CEO of Policy Research Institute of your Equitable Development, PRIDE, and Mustafa Amjad, the Chair of Pakistan Renewable Energy Coalition, to please present our token of appreciation for our guests. May I also request the pleasure of having Dr. Nafisa Shah on stage, please? And Dr. Khalid Walid from SDPI as well.